I've been talking about stat sticks and pseudo-exalteds for the past few videos. My last video was about the arcane, Melee Doughty, and I went over the pros and cons of Melee Doughty and how it requires additional mods to work properly, and would require you to sacrifice important modifiers that scale your damage better than shoving in a lot of crit. Because you're here and you saw the thumbnail, you're curious to see if Melee Doughty works and is it good on Excalibur Slash Dash? And the answer to those two questions is yes, absolutely. However, there are several caveats. For more info about Melee Doughty and stat stick building, please do go watch that video. Otherwise, a lot of these things, including some terminology, might go over your head. So I highly recommend it. Trust me, it will save you more time. And Melee Doughty still isn't the best for Slash Dash, even though it works. And to understand why, let's break down the ability along with its pros and cons. Slash Dash is Excalibur's first ability, and it is a pseudo-exalted weapon. This is the part where people skip and ask the same questions that have been answered. Being a pseudo-exalted means it scales from several modifiers, such as your Warframe's mods, a majority of melee mods, arcanes, some melee traits, incarnate evolutions, Kuva elemental bonuses, some weapon skins, and combo counter. And you seriously want to avoid any type of combo, pausing, mechanic, or traits on melees, because that will completely reset your combo duration. And combo counter is super important because it scales your damage per combo. And how does the ability actually function? This is the part of the pros and cons list as well. Starting off with the pros. It is a mobility tool that lunges you forward, and you can just use this ability alone to travel across the map without having to worry about bullet jumping. But if there's an enemy within the radius of your crosshairs, it will lock onto that enemy. And once you make contact with an enemy, it deals damage and forcefully procs bleeds. This is important, so keep that in mind. And if there's a cluster of enemies, Slash Dash will ping pong between enemies. And while you're in this Slash Dash animation, you're invulnerable to damage, while also snapshotting any buff in time. Meaning, if you have a damage buff active, with let's say 1 second left, as your Slash Dash is pinging between enemies, that damage buff will still be active, even though the duration has run out, until the Slash Dash attack string ends. Also keep that in mind. Here are the cons. It is a single target ability, meaning it does not have mass AoE clear with a single strike, compared to other pseudo-exalteds like Shattered Lash, Landslide, and Whip Claw. Slash Dash's clear speed is extremely slow. It has animation locking, and one of its weaknesses is a bumpy terrain. If Excalibur is planted on the ground and there's a small elevated bump, Slash Dash cannot overcome it, forcing you to jump over, go around it, just to hit the enemy on the other side. Sure, it's not as bad, but it kills the fluidity and the continuation of the attack string. Onto its stats, because Slash Dash has hidden stats. It has 0% crit and status chance, and a 1x crit damage multiplier, meaning mods don't have anything to scale off when it comes to modding crits and status chance, unless you use incarnate evolutions that give you base values. Now, let's go back to its scaling and special traits. It force procs bleeds with every hit, regardless of what you mod onto it, so it's not held back by damage type weighting. And I did say the ability scales with a majority of melee mods, and this means if you want bigger damage numbers, you mod for strength, base damage, crits, and elemental damage mods. And if you want to use Melee Doughty, you need to sacrifice mod slots to accommodate status chance and increasing the puncture weighting to give you a higher puncture proc rate to increase the critical damage that you get from Doughty. Again, go watch the Melee Doughty video for a better understanding of the arcane. This sacrifice means you're excluding mods like additional base damage and elemental damage mods, which heavily impact the total outgoing damage of the ability. So for a visual demonstration, I will showcase results of different builds between two different stat sticks versus heavily building into Doughty, hybrid elemental Doughty, or a very well balanced build with free slots to add more damage. Alright, now that you saw the difference and what did more damage, let's take a look at the whole build in question. So now let's take a look at the gameplay loop of this build. And for the Operator Arcanes, I'm using Magus Aggress. How to activate this? Listen carefully. You go to your Operator Drifter, whatever you bound it to, you hit the melee button. You do this animation that brings you back into your Warframe. Once you do that, you trigger Magus Aggress. Attacking with your melee will get rid of this buff, but using your Pseudo Exalted keeps this buff active. This is a 300% crit damage multiplier for heavy blades and hammers. Now, when you approach enemies, you can see we're invisible. And when we're invisible, we get other buffs. One of them being Arcane Crepulsar. This gives us strength and final crit damage multiplier. All we have to do now is use the third ability while invisible because we get more strength, meaning higher multiplier. Boom. As you can see, we have 690% final damage multiplier on our melee. First of all, nice. Then you use the fourth ability, which is going to be our Wrathful Advance. And we just zoom and hit every enemy in sight. Now, you can see this is 1 million damage without any combo built up. Now, let's see how this looks like with a fully built combo. Okay, our combo is fully built up. We're gonna wait to go invisible. Use our abilities. And now, damage went up. Pretty huge! Notice when we use our energy, we got shields, and it goes into overshields. And if our shields break, it replenishes those shields thanks to Guardian. And if we lose invisibility, we can always use Rolling Guard and wait for a Sentinel to make us invisible yet again. Or we can use Rolling Guard and immediately follow up with our first ability to keep us invulnerable while we wait for our Sentinel to make us invisible. Early in the video, I did mention that Slash Dash has snapshotting properties. So, for example, if I were to use my Wrathful Advance right now, we can see the countdown timer. It's at 9 seconds. So I'm going to wait for it to go down to at least 1 second. And you'll see I will still have my red crits active even though the timer has run out. So that's another good thing to pay attention to, so you don't waste a lot of energy. So let's take a look at the Excalibur and stat stick build. Okay, here we are taking a look at the build. Starting off with the Archon Shards, of course. 3 Red Town Forge for the strength. 2 Casting Speed Shards. It's come on. You already know why. Long animations, bad equals death. And this definitely improves the cast time of his third ability, which is going to be a crucial part of this build, which further boosts our damage. And that's because we're using Furious Javelin. Furious Javelin is going to give us a melee damage multiplier per enemy hit. So it scales with strength and enemies hit. This is a final damage multiplier. So think of it like Eclipse for melees, which affects Slash Dash. Another boost to our damage is going to be our Helminth ability, which is Wrathful Advance from Kullervo. This is a flat crit chance, which is applied after all your built-up calculated crit chance. For Excalibur, I have Growing Power. This is more strength. This is 25% strength when we proc a SAS effect. Easily done. And then for my modded strength, I have Transient Fortitude for the 55% strength and Precision Intensify. Transient Fortitude plus the Archon Shards gives you a nice boost, going all the way up to 200%. And then Precision Intensify gives you 90% strength on the fourth ability, which gives you a flat crit chance multiplier. Furious Javelin for our massive boost in damage on our melees. And then the rest is utility and duration. Prime Flow for the large energy pool, Equilibrium, converting health and energy orbs to whatever you need, Streamline for the efficiency, reducing how much our abilities cost, because we will spam abilities here and there, and if we lose invisibility, we have 2 ways for survivability. Again, dodge rolling, using the first ability, blinding enemies, or using Radial Javelin. Now, both Blind and Radial Javelin have a nice, juicy base range of 25 meters, so I don't need to mod for any more range. And Rolling Guard for the 3 seconds of invulnerability and status cleansing. Prime Continuity, just to counteract the negative duration and just to give us a decent duration overall. Crepulsar, crit damage, strength, and Fury for the juice and the base damage. For additional energy management, I do have Zenric, Energy Pulse, Wellspring, and Inner Might. Inner Might allows us to use an ability without using energy every 1 minute. Pretty good. Moving on to the best stat stick for this particular build, Magistar, giving Slash Dash a base of 16% crit chance from its original 0. So every other crit modifier will be scaling from that base of 16%. And a base 1 times crit damage multiplier. So it's going to scale from its 1 times to a 2 times. Anything added afterwards is going to be a bigger boost. So whenever we mod our stat stick, we're just going to be adding a lot of base damage, crit damage, and elemental damage mods. Very simple. For arcanes, exposure, elemental damage. This is 240% corrosive damage. Big. The Riven here is electricity, melee damage, and crit damage. The faction damage does not affect the stat stick, so that's a free negative. Now, what do you replace here? Electricity mod, of course. And when you combine this, that's more corrosive damage. Base damage, and of course, Arcane Fury for even more base damage. Crit chance, crit damage, and crit chance with some crit damage. And the best part is, I did not have to sacrifice any slot to put puncture or status chance so I can run Melee Doughty. It's just pure straight up damage. I have a base of 16% crit chance. This is 440% plus 110% plus 220%. So that's a total of 770% crit chance, which is an 8.70 multiplier. 8.70 times 16 is going to be 139% crit chance. So Slash Dash will have 139% crit chance when you build all of these up. And then Wrathful Advance is going to go right on top of that. So this is why we're getting really high tier red crits. For then the crit damage to have higher scaling on that crit chance, because every critical tier you go up, your crit damage increases. And to balance out the additional crit chance, you do need some crit damage to go with it. And if you don't have any other damage modifiers, and adding pure crit alone won't be good for your damage output. Now, in the background footage, you saw me using the Kubrow, because a lot of people love saying the Kubrow is awesome, but that thing was the most useless piece of garbage I've ever seen in my entire life. But hey, if you like using the Kubrow, use the Kubrow. People have to come to terms that it's just a bad freaking companion. Sentinels and Kavats are just better. Other thing about using Mecha Set to clear rooms faster. The problem is that you need to actually proc a stats effect and that enemy to die from that status effect. If you one-shot the enemy, Mecha Set is not going to do anything for you. So, for example, if you one-shot this enemy, you're not going to spread, slash, and bleed everything in sight, because that enemy needs to have that proc for at least 1 second and then die for it to spread. Meaning you have to nerf your damage just so you can have some AoE clear. And you're not going to do that, right? That's stupid. Now, the reason why a Sentinel is better, we have the option of regenerating our shields and boosting our shields. So this is another layer of survivability. And I'm using the Shade in this particular situation because I want to go invisible. Let's go over the Shade build real quick. It is the most basic build. You just want to have Ghost, cloaks the owner when you're near enemies, Guardian to replenish your shields when they break, Manifold Bond. When you kill enemies with 3 or more status effects, it reduces the cooldowns of your abilities. And we can run Tenacious Bond for a final crit damage multiplier on top of that. And I'm pairing it up with my Burst Laser Prime. Burst Laser Prime is a secondary weapon. Why do we use a secondary weapon and not something like the Tazok or whatever? Because for one, this has a decent crit chance. We want our crit chance to be over 50%. As you can see right there, it's over 50%. And we can run elemental damage mods and the Augur mods. So energy spent on abilities is converted into shields. It's modded for viral heat and radiation here. And as you can see, we have Tenacious Bond active. So yeah, folks, that has been it from me. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching. As always, a peace. Bye-bye now.